All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to One Soccer. I'm your host for today, Josh Deming, joined by my colleague Alex Gonge-Ruzik. And we are going to discuss some managers today. Alex, today's stream is sponsored by our friends at tonybet. And the topic of conversation, Jesse Marsch versus Maurizio Pochettino. Because the U.S. men's national team have apparently appointed him. Now, I need to check what the latest is, but I mean, Fabrizio Romano obviously touched on it. An account that goes by at Andrew underscore SO4 underscore, I believe was the one who broke the story. He's getting a lot of love in US circles, so I wanted to give him a shout out as well. But it does look like this deal is, if not 100% done right now, Alex, very, very close to being done. And I just want your initial thoughts.
Yeah, it looks like it'll get over the line sooner rather than later. I think the latest was that they just had to still iron out some compensation, with Pochettino getting fired from the U.S. Or not the U.S. Sorry, from Chelsea in that last stint. But yeah, it looks like it's over the line. And who would have thought that when Canada and the U.S. play each other in a friendly in the fall, that Pochettino is going to be strolling down one bench and Marsh is going to be strolling down the other. But in a sense, I'm not too surprised, because you always kind of wondered that, given that it's a guaranteed World Cup, the opportunity that it could present, that if it could attract a top caliber of manager, at least we kind of always pondered it out loud, but we didn't expect it, especially because Canada and the US were kind of locked in with their guys of Herdman and Berhalter. But then all of a sudden, fate has it, circumstance has it, spots open up. And yeah, for the US, I think Pochettino is a fascinating hire in terms of pedigree, in terms of just, what he brings, that he's been at PSG, that he's been at Tottenham, that he's been at Chelsea, he's dealt with some big players, he's dealt with some big egos, he's done, relatively well at those respective clubs. I am curious to see how that slots in, but I think overall, in terms of the candidates they could have gotten, this is a pretty good hire, pretty good.
Do you think it's funny that both the men and women got Chelsea's two managers? Do you think there's anything unique about that? Matt Crocker obviously has a connection to Maurizio Pochettino through his time at Southampton, but I just find it fascinating that both the U.S. programs ended up with Chelsea managers.
Yeah, Todd Bowley must have made some calls, right? They get the American links there. Bit strange, I suppose, but hey, I mean, for the women's side, we saw the effect it had with Emma Hayes. They got a good one in terms of a winner, and they've already been rewarded for it. And this is just the start, but we'll see on this side with Pochettino, right? He's tough to nail down, in the sense where I'm like, I evaluate him. I feel like he's done well, like considering all he had to deal with Chelsea last year, how chaotic it was. Their start for them to like even be within touching distance of Europe was incredible, and I thought he did pretty well. Like, you looked at a lot of the advanced numbers, like he kind of got a bit unlucky in a lot of senses. Like, Nicholas Jackson was missing chances for fun. A lot of his players are missing chances for fun. They would leak dumb goals, stuff like that. They had some crazy injuries. And then you look at his other stints, like PSG, right? Like, it's just such a strange club where, yeah, he was dominating France, but then in Europe, they just couldn't make that next step. And then even Tottenham, I thought his Tottenham teams were quite entertaining and good to watch. So it is tough to actually gauge what he's done as a manager, but he's done a lot of good things. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how that translates over. So obviously Matt Crocker saw something in that.
Absolutely. Now, if you guys are joining us on stream right now, drop a like and let us know who you think won the manager battle, Canada or the United States, and give us some thoughts on Maurizio Pochettino. Alex highlighted a lot of where I was going to try to go next with him. I'm just going to try to go over a couple pros and cons that come to my mind when I picture Pochettino. I know one of his biggest criticisms is the fact that, he doesn't win, which I also think is a little unfair because he went to PSG, but when you go to PSG, you're expected to win. I get that. I thought did an excellent job, like you said, Alex, at Tottenham. I mean, he brought that team to a Champions League final. I just saw a stat, don't 100% quote me, but I believe Tottenham went years without finishing in the top four before Pochettino arrived, and they haven't finished in the top four since he left. His time at Chelsea, I'm a Chelsea fan, so I was able to watch a lot of him last year. And I mean, following Chelsea is a bit of a roller coaster ride, but I thought he did pretty well. That team was riddled with injuries. They weren't built properly. I didn't think that they were even going to become a top 8 team. He had a really strong end of the season. He brought the best out of certain players. We've seen him do that before with Dele Alli. We've seen him do it with Cole Cold Palmer. So we'll have to see how that team develops. But I mean, at the end of the day, U.S. fans and, talking to a few friends I have on the other side of the border, were very convinced that they were going to get a U.S. coach, or at least a coach that kind of had connections to Major League Soccer. I think Matt Crocker going outside the box, tapping into that connection at Southampton, bringing in Pochettino, is a massive, massive get, because he was also linked to the England job, Alex. And I actually thought that that's probably where he was going to end up. Tons of experience managing in England. I think he would honestly have been a natural fit. Pochettino does get criticized from time to time, though, about not only the fact that he hasn't really been able to win, which I don't really agree with, but it's also the fact that he can sometimes be stubborn with his tactics. He didn't change much watching Chelsea this year, so I think it's a great hire. I really do. We'll get into some comments here, guys. Let us know what you rate the hire out of 1 to 10. But Alex, how do you think it compares to Jesse Marsch? Canada getting Jesse Marsch, there's a lot of hype. Big manager bounce back. Do you think Pochettino could give the U.S. a big bounce back when it comes up to the next friendlies where we take them on?
You have to think so. I think it's something where what's interesting is that there's not like too much of a stylistic change from Greg Berhalter to Mauricio Pochettino. So there's not like a huge adjustment. And I think from the U.S. perspective, for as much as you can go after Greg Berhalter for how the end of his tenure went, like at the end of the day, I always thought the style of play he wanted to employ made sense for what that group had, right? It was just more executing and also adaptability. That US team just wasn't very adaptable. They struggled on the road. So I'm curious to see if Pochettino can kind of bring some of the strengths the team has while maybe improving the others. I mean, you mentioned the stubbornness. I don't know if, because that was one thing Berhalter could often be accused of, is just being really rigid with his game model. And like he pretty much, like, you didn't have to see him play. You knew it was going to be 4-3-3. You knew how the midfielders were going to play. You know how the wingers were going to make runs. It was very vertical, etc. Right? It was just a lot of the same buzzwords. But I think if Pochettino can come in, like, that US has very good midfield. You look out wide. I think Pulisic, I mean, of course he's gonna, love playing under a coach that wants to play free-flowing, high-attacking soccer. Maybe, Pochettino can figure out something with, the number 9 situation, because he's had a chance to work with some pretty good number 9s, like, the likes of Kane and Mbappe. Mbappe not really a 9, but again, he's had the chance to work with that sort of caliber of goal scorer. Perhaps that can be what Florian Balogun needs up front. I think this Pochettino fit will be quite similar to the one with Marsch. For with Marsch, even before he came in, you're like, all right, there's a fit with this Canadian group, how he wants to play. You can see it one for one. I see that with Pochettino, and he has, more experience than Marsch. I don't think it's like a huge amount more of experience, in the sense like they've both managed at, some of the highest levels. Of course, Pochettino's been at the top clubs, whereas for Marsch, he just got that taste with Leipzig. But I think it'll be pretty similar, I think, in terms of that bump.
I think that's fair, because going off that point, he managed Leipzig, which is a big club, wasn't overly successful. He was in the Premier League with Leeds, had a couple good moments. He did really well with Salzburg, but Pochettino had a solid kind of spell with Espanyol and Southampton, which kind of got him on the map. He did really, really well at Tottenham, despite not winning. I mean, for PSG standards, he actually did quite poor at PSG, which he got sacked for. And then Chelsea, I thought he had a pretty solid campaign. Still was sacked because he just couldn't get on with the board there. So we'll go through a few questions here. I asked another question for you guys. Rate the Pochettino hire out of 10. If I was a US fan, man, I don't know. I don't know who else realistically you could put above Pochettino. I would probably give it a 9. I'd be thrilled, and seeing some US fans and just, keeping an eye on X, they seem very, very happy. They thought like Steve Cherundolo was probably going to be one of the favorites up there, or Wilfred Nancy, which I think would have been a good hire. But I don't know, man. I think this is a really good one. So we'll get into the comments, see what some of you guys are saying. We asked which hire won, Marsch or Pochettino. CM says, I'm going to say Marsch for now. Poch is a big name, but I'm not sure how it will translate to the U.S. men's national team on an international level.
They have to remember this U.S. squad's very good, and
Yeah.
yeah, I look at a lot of these pieces. I can just see them fitting in. I think for me, the big questions really I only have with this U.S. team are in goal, right? Like what happens in goal. I just think Matt Turner, after the last year for club and country, kind of showed some of his limitations as a goalkeeper, and that didn't necessarily fit in the system, right? So that's going to be a big question of, do they think a Gaga Slolina's ready playing in League One? He obviously had a great League One debut, or not League One debut, a EFL Cup debut this past week. He's at Barnsley now. It was a very random transfer. But what do they do in goal? But man, you look across the board like that. Chris Richards being the leader of that back line. You look at that. I feel like Pochettino will really like that mold of player. I think Anthony Robinson is going to be fantastic under Pochettino. I think that's something where you've seen some of these fullbacks Pochettino's been able to work with. You see the potential there. That midfield, right? Can you get the most out of McKennie, Johnny Cardoso, Adams, De La Torre, Musa? Like, there's so much to work with in the midfield. The wingers out, we mentioned Pulisic earlier. Of course, can't forget Gio Reyna in that mix and what he can bring. And, Pochettino seems more, likely to use attacking midfielders, right? He's someone who's used a Dele Alli at Tottenham. He used, some of those more, because, you don't always see that. You saw that last year at Chelsea with how Cole Palmer he was able to, kind of have that sort of creativity. Wonder what that can mean for Gio Reyna. Like, I do think for Pochettino, it could translate over. And for what it's worth, what you mentioned about stubbornness can actually help him at the international level. Because remember, a lot of the same things were said about Jesse Marsh, and he's really stuck to his style. How will it translate over? It turns out pretty well in the sense that it's clear. Sometimes when you have international, you have guys coming from different systems, you don't have much time to work. Stubbornness and clear can work to an extent, as long as he's flexible. That's what Marsh did, right? Marsh was stubborn, but flexible enough to know, okay, I can adjust my press, I can adjust my line. And that's maybe where a guy like Berhalter fell short, where he was so stubborn, but it wasn't really much adjustment or as much rigidity. As long as Pochettino comes with that kind of right approach, there's a lot to like, I'd say.
I also think it's important for the US to have a manager that the players respect. Now, not saying they don't, respect Berhalter, but Berhalter has had issues with players on both sides, where there's been reports that like certain players like Chris Pulisic really, really liked him, but there was reports because Berhalter allowed him to do whatever he wanted. And a lot of players they said, like, a lot of the US pundits said, like, the players lost the pressure because Berhalter wasn't applying it. He also had the big scandal with the Reynas. So I think having someone who has been to some of the biggest clubs in the world, is a big name, can come in, like, this US program continues to get better. Their players are playing all over Europe. I think he will earn respect right away. And it kind of leads into this comment here, which I think is a good one from Matt, that says Poch thrived in an ego-free Tottenham side where he was in contact every day. The U.S. national team is not that. So Alex, I don't know, because like, not to be disrespectful, but the U.S. have good players, but they don't have superstars. So I think if you're looking at a club team that could be similar to a national team, I think you could probably put Tottenham in the U.S. in that same category, where they're going to compete. I mean, the U.S. got out of the last World Cup. They have good players. They don't really have any massive superstars, but not to say that there's not egos in that team. So do you think that there will be any ego issues with this U.S. team? And if so, you're looking at the big boys like McKennie and Gio, Pulisic, Balogun, or do you not think that will be an issue?
You can only wonder, right? I guess, especially after this Copa America, where
humbling.
Yeah, it was humbling. I mean, ultimately, it'll be up to the players, because again, there's just so much that went on with the Berhalter situation, in the sense that it was just such a chaotic 5 years, where for 4 years it was pretty straightforward. It was just doing his thing, and then just feels like ever since the World Cup, it's just been so chaotic. Was the Reyna situation. There was him leaving. There was him coming back. Just everything that's kind of gone on. I think this is a fresh slate, right? And I think if the players don't respect what a Pochettino brings to the board, I mean, you have to be really worried. And I guess it'll be ultimately up to Pochettino. I think what's worth noting with Pochettino is it's not like I like what you mentioned, Josh, about the US having depth. Like this guy has options where it's like, all right, if you go in the midfield and say for whatever reason you don't like what just because they've been two pillars and for example, they've had various criticisms, like Tyler Adams. He's a great player, great heart and soul. His criticism's not really his fault. He just can't stay healthy. Where does a Pochettino draw a line with, okay, like, Tyler Adams, just be healthy, you get focused on all that. And then you got a Weston McKennie, right, who sometimes for the quality, the class player he is, you always see reports of, oh, like, is McKennie, in this, for example, like little things like the professionalism that he brings on a day-to-day basis, or like, he came to the last Copa America, he didn't just look 100% fit, he didn't look like himself when he had such a great season for Juventus. You kind of wonder, like, how does that happen with a player like that? Well, if Pochettino sees things like that, he has the option where, all right, you got pretty good depth of De La Torre, you got Johnny Cardoso, Musa, you got so many other players that are coming through the pipeline. It feels like every day you're hearing about some of these Americans pushing to higher and higher levels that I don't know. I feel like he should be able to push and light a fire in the squad, because I think that's what this U.S. team needs. Ultimately, I like what you mentioned about them not maybe having a true star other than Pulisic, right? Like, and even then, Pulisic sometimes, like, he'll show you moments of being a star, but then it's all right. Like, just constantly at the club level, it's always a fight for him to get those regular minutes. At AC Milan, of course, it's been a lot better, but even in this preseason, like with all the guys they've brought in, he's been in a fight just to earn a starting spot. Can Pochettino kind of harness that? Like, look, yeah, you're the US. There's natural expectation, pressure, but like, be a team, be a group of guys that just rallies around the team cause, and maybe that'll get the most out of a Balogun, a Pulisic, a Weah, a Reina, instead of maybe focusing too much on that's kind of what it felt like with Berhalter. Like you mentioned, it was nailed on, and ultimately, with the depth US has, like, there's only really 2 or 3 players that should be nailed on, right? Like especially in that front six, like it's Pulisic, and that's pretty much it in terms of, like, Musa, McKennie. Yeah. Other than that, like, the competition should be wide open, and these Americans should be hungry and willing to fight for their place.
Absolutely. I think Pochettino will give this team a lift. And I asked a question earlier, rate the Pochettino higher, and I see a lot of US fans in here saying that it was like it was a 10 out of 10. Someone really liked my Tottenham and US comparison. And I did not say Tottenham have never had any superstars. I was saying that, like, at the time when Pochettino was there, they had a lot of good players, but compared to a Real Madrid, Barcelona, City, like some of those bigger teams, they didn't have the biggest names in world football when Pochettino was there, just like the US right now don't have the biggest names in world football, but they have a ton of talent, just like Tottenham did. And I think Pochettino could probably, hopefully for the US fans, get the best out of this team. And I think they need to. There was a few, actually, I had a comment up here that kind of went into what I was mentioning earlier is, Berhalter not being the greatest manager, not that no one respected him, but I do agree that the players could get away with anything that they really wanted to, and there wasn't really a punishment around it. Like Alex, you mentioned, the same players would be put out almost every lineup. That was Berhalter's team. Those were Berhalter's guys. The only big issue was Gio, which kind of made that fan base kind of go in too, because if Gio was on Berhalter's side, those starting 11s would probably look very similar each and every week, and the US fans would be happy. But considering that there was an issue and a scandal with one of the most promising and talented players the US have, created a lot of issues with Berhalter, on top of the fact that it's, no disrespect to Greg, Pochettino is a much bigger name, and I do think he can come in here and just really give them a lift. I mean, Alex, just think back to when we had Biello and we had absolutely no idea where this program was going to go next. Who was going to come in? Who was going to get this men's national team playing the way that they did during the World Cup qualifying leading up to the 2022 World Cup? 2023 was a disaster for Canada in every sense of the word. On the field, off the field, I didn't know what was going to happen. And I did a prediction video where I just said, I'm like, I don't think we're going to get out of the group. There's nothing I saw in 2023 for the 2024 Copa America that makes me confident that Canada will get out of the group. Well, all of a sudden, Jesse Marsch comes in. I'm like, this could work. This could give the players a lift. This could give the fan base a lift. And he took us on an incredible journey. I had a lot more fun watching this Copa America than I did the World Cup, despite it being the World Cup being special, because, we performed. We had a brand new coach, came in with some new ideas, switched some things up. gave players an opportunity. Bombito, Cornelius are two prime examples. They stepped up to the plate, and now they're both, one's in Liga and one's very close to moving there. So I think Pochettino coming here is going to give the fan base a huge boost. It's going to give the players a huge boost. And I'm curious to see, like you mentioned, with this giant pool of players, what players are going to be the Bombito and Cornelius for the US? Who's going to sneak into a starting 11? Who's going to get pushed on? I think, I don't know. If I was a US fan, I would be over the moon, because I personally don't know what other manager I would be this excited about. That's realistic. That's the same case for Jesse Marsch. I thought he was the top target, in my opinion, that was realistic and that could fit this program. So that is my thoughts in there. So we'll get into a few comments here. Going to Greg Turdhalter. Berhalter needed those guys to give him coaching suggestions, according to Adams. Marsh was a good hire that turned out to be even better. Poch has a similar feel right now, but will it turn out to be better? We will see. I think that's fair. I don't know. I just don't know how you don't get excited about something like this. Pochettino will really get the U.S. men's national team over the hump and win another Gold Cup. What do you think the expectations would be now, Alex, around this U.S. pool? Do you think getting a manager like this in immediately make them, quarterfinals and beyond? Well, I guess, they made it to the quarterfinals No, they made it to round of 16. So quarterfinals, is that kind of like maybe the expectations looking ahead to the 2026 World Cup?
Yeah, I think a home World Cup, hire this caliber, everything there, like quarterfinal for the US feels like a pretty reasonable bar. Like, this is a team that, not saying it's like a fully, like, I think they'd exceed expectations, but this is a team with semifinal upside, right? Like, there's no reason why they can't make a run that deep. And I think that with the hire like that, it kind of cements it. Because they kind of have a lot of the pieces you want from a team at this level, in the sense of they got a lot of guys playing in top 5 leagues, more and more guys getting regular minutes in top 5 leagues. I know that was an issue for the US players before, where a lot of them were getting moves but maybe not playing. Like, a lot of these guys are playing in good environments where they're trusted week in, week out, especially the core of their team. So yeah, I think for the US, it's like, just continue to dominate CONCACAF. That's a must. With the let's be real, they have a huge gap on Canada and Mexico in terms of just the squad quality they have, in terms of the depth for Canada. The one thing keeping them in this race is that they have, Canada knows it's 18 to 23, and they have a pretty good 18 to 23, and of course that they now have a coach that fits that. But the US still just has a huge edge on depth, in the sense that for Canada, if you lose a starter, you lose 2 starters. Now, like, you have 2 Liga center backs now. Great. This is a dream that, Canadians been having for a long time, when it was just like any dude who was playing, you just throw back at center back. Well, if one of those Liga guys goes down, what happens? Whereas the US, all right, yeah, you could lose one of your big midfielders. You got another, midfielder who could step up. You lose one of your fullbacks. You got another fullback who can step up. And I think, of course, there's a clear edge over Mexico. So yeah, this US team should keep dominating CONCACAF and build so that they can make a deep run at the World Cup, because there's every reason for them to, because it would be massive for the sport in that country, and we'll keep an eye on it.
Yeah, I've been seeing a few comments saying that Mexico is falling so far behind right now, but that's a whole different topic. I agree. I think that, they're making a lot of mistakes internally that is impacting the way that this national team is moving forward, which is why the US have a big leg up on them, and I think Canada's starting to get one as well. I got a couple questions kind of based off of this question for you, Alex. So the question is, Josh and Alex, what are your expectation windows? Josh and Alex, what are your expectations for the September window versus the USA and Mexico result-wise? So that's the first question I want to ask, but then I want to kind of double down one, I don't know if I've ever been more excited for a friendly. I'm not a huge fan of friendlies, just from an entertainment point of view, which is why I'm a big fan of, like, when the Nations Leagues were introduced, because at least it gets competitive football. But I'm very excited for this US-Canada friendly, because we get to see Jesse Marsch taking on the US. We now get to see Pochettino's first game or second game. I can't remember how it goes in the schedule, but regardless, one of his first games. I'm very, very intrigued to see how this goes. So result-wise for a friendly doesn't mean much to me. I think both games are going to be close, probably 1-goal games. That's what I kind of think. So I want to add to that question and say, Alex, for expectations for Canada, What would you like to see from Jesse Marsh? Do you want to see, in terms of the roster, would you want to see a full strength best 11 or best 23, 26, whatever they call in, because this is the best players I want to take a look at? Or if you're going to be a little, flexible, how many like dual nationals or under the radar players would you like to see get in? What kind of split would you want? Like 80% full best roster, 20% players that maybe like a Santiago Lopez, maybe like a Promise David. What would you like to see that way? And if you want to touch on the results, you can. I think they're going to be two close games.
Yeah, I mean, it's two friendlies. No one's going to get blown out here, I think, from either side. I think, Canada, Mexico, US, Mexico, Canada, like it's all going to be pretty close and tight. What I'd say is just for Canada, I think they're going to take it seriously because they've got Nations League to focus on in November. So they obviously want to get prepared for that. I think they want to learn from the Copa America. So I'd say it's going to be a balance. I'd expect a lot of Jesse Marsh had his A team this summer. He now knows who within his A team are regulars. He also had a chance to test out some B team guys that I'm sure he's fascinated with, right? Like he had the chance to look at a Schwanier, an Ahmed, an Oluwasi. You go down the list with some of those guys who impressed at Copa America, who we were happy to see. All right, as well who's kind of knocking on the door. Kind of build off that. All right, I think what we'll see some pretty strong squads to start games with some changes. Like, all right, this is what I had at Copa America. Maybe let's tweak one of the guys up front. Let's tweak one of the guys in midfield. And I think really then the experimentation will come off the bench. So I'd expect Marsh to strike a good balance. He, based on his comments after the tournament, he's someone who realizes the value of dual nationals and everything that he understands that it's not just, all right, working with your 23 and going from there. He kind of wondered right after the Copa America of, yeah, it was great, but he kind of really leaned on his squad heavily, squeezed the juice out of that lemon. But then he explained it well, being like, all right, I'm doing this to see what I have, to get a proper look, right? Use this opportunity. So I'd expect him just to react accordingly. And I think that could be good news for the likes of a Promise David or a Santiago Lopez. Who knows? Maybe he'll be able to work some magic with a Daniel Jebison and give him a call. We'll see some of the other dual nationals because, yeah, it's definitely it feels like there could be a good mix to be had.
I think I kind of said it when I asked you the question. I would like to see like an 80-20, strong roster, the core players, and just, a little experimentation in there. I think Santiago Lopez, if he's not ready to commit, which who knows if you offer a young 19-year-old the chance to come, but kind of like we did with Koleosho when we brought him into a camp, no pressure, they're friendlies, get to know some of the players, get to know the manager. Lopez is a very special talent, I think, and with the 2026 coming up, knowing that Mexico and Canada are both co-hosts, he's got the option for both countries. I'd say the ball's in our court right now, just considering the things that we've heard about him and really enjoying playing for Canada at the U20 level. I just think it'd be kind of like Zwiderski came in for a camp and just get a little familiarity. I would like to see something like that. Doesn't mean he has to play. And then I would like to see, I'd like to see Promise David come in. A little biased, being able to talk with him. I think he's got a fascinating story. Hard worker, a unique profile, and the fact that he was scoring for fun in Estonia, and it's Estonia. It's solid that he's scoring. That's great, but what will he do going to a bigger league? Well, he went to Belgium, which in my opinion is a solid league. Went to one of the top teams there. Unfortunately, just missed out on Champions League qualification. Probably will end up in the Europa League. But he's been scoring. He's been scoring in friendlies. He's been scoring in competitive matches. He's already won a trophy there. He's said that he's very interested to play for the Canadian men's national team. I feel like that's a good player to take a look at. There's a few other ones. We will move on. We will move on to Koleosho just because I've seen it a couple times in the chat, Alex. I don't know anything on this subject because I have been in conversations with him, but that was years ago. He's eligible for 4 nations: Nigeria, Italy, Canada, and the U.S. men's national team. Knowing that he's probably going to be in for a decent season in the championship, he will have interest. I'd say the ball right now is in Italy's court. But considering Jesse Marsh, an American, taking over Canada, he's been in a Canada camp before. He's played with the U.S. at, I believe, the U15 level. It's where I believe he spent most of his life. Now they have Pochettino. Do you think anything, it's your opinion, but do you think anything changes there? Where do you think maybe he's leaning? I still think it's Italy, but that is going to be a question that will continue to get asked until he eventually commits to a country.
Yeah, I think ultimately rare for a player, but I think the ball's in Koleosho's court in the sense that I think, Canada, the US, Italy, even Nigeria would all be foolish not to have a go at him. I think it's ultimately going to be what he wants because he's in a bit of a unique situation of Canada comes calling. Well, they obviously have Jesse Marsh as a head coach. They can offer him decent amount of playing time. Like they got good winger depth, but there's definitely Koleosho would play a rotational role at the very least, if not more, given his talent and potential. And they've got a guaranteed World Cup. Okay, that's pretty good things to offer a youngster. Okay, what do the U.S. have? Oh, a guaranteed World Cup as well. A good coach, Mauricio Pochettino. I'm sure one that Koleosho will have heard about. They've got strong winger depth, but also I think there's a scenario where Koleosho could see himself at least being in that squad. Okay, similar scenario to Canada. So maybe it comes down to a heart thing or versus opportunity. But then you got Italy as well, where it's they're going to give him plenty of opportunity. They've been someone where they've already shown with the minutes they've been giving to Ganonto, who is playing in the championship, that all right, the championship is no obstacle in terms of playing for Italy right now, with just the kind of weird generational gap of attackers they have, where they can produce defenders for fun, but just attackers are hard to find. Italy might, just in terms of a pure playing perspective, might be his best opportunity. But of course, there's the eternal question. You say kind of jokingly, but hey, they've missed the last two World Cups. Are they going to make another World Cup this year? Or not this year, but this cycle? Yes, it's been expanded, but not really for European spots, right? The expansion was around the world. Europe only gained a couple of spots. Will Italy even be able to get one of those? You have to watch out. And of course, there's Nigeria as well as an option. I think ultimately it's going to come up to what Koleosho wants. A guaranteed World Cup? Is it being in that Canada or US, or is it maybe more guaranteed minutes with Italy, but more of a project? I ultimately think it's been hard to get a read on the player in that regard. So I imagine it'll just be a lot of busy phone lines, and I think when he's ready, he's ready. So hopefully Jesse Marsh is just calling and giving him the best shot to be there if Koleosho makes that decision.
Ganotto was the reason I thought that Italy would be the number one option, because the Italians have kind of dipped around to see. I don't think this is the strongest Italy we're going to see. Obviously, despite winning that Euros, it kind of seems like they're looking around, and the fact that when they asked Ganotto to come up, he was playing in Switzerland, which is going to be my transition to our next topic, makes me think that a player like Koleosho, who's got a lot of upside playing in the championship, proved that he can cut it in the Premier League. We can see here fitness issues can be a thing. I tend to think right now he's leaning towards Italy if that call-up comes, but then it's kind of same to Jebison. How long are you willing to wait, and are you down to represent another country? I think, and this is just my opinion, but I think Daniel Jebison is backing himself, especially after getting a move to the Premier League, that he thinks England could be an option, depending on how he develops, depending if he has a big season. It doesn't take much to look at the Solanke, where things, it kind of looks like you're struggling for a bit. You find yourself in the right environment. You hit your stride, you score a bunch of goals, you get a big move to Tottenham, you're in the England squad. Crazier things have happened. So I think he maybe is buying a little time, and I just don't know how long he's going to wait until maybe an opportunity comes where he's like, you know what, I need to start looking elsewhere. And I don't know. I feel like Koleosho will wait for Italy, and it will come a point where maybe as that 2026 World Cup's approaching, if he's not got called up, maybe that's when he starts looking elsewhere. All hypothetical.
Just Jesse Marsh, you have to remember, he's in a good position though, because what is nice is you don't need Jebison. You don't need Koleosho. It'd be nice to have them, right? Because I think they've got incredible upside that in 3-4 years, having them in your squad would be like, oh, that's a good commitment. But right now, you don't need them. Like Jebison, long term, you're pretty good in the striker position in the sense that David's not going anywhere anytime soon for Canada. You've got a lot of guys around him with potential, right? You can't forget your Russell Rose and some of these other youngsters doing things. Heck, Kwesi Poku, recently gets some European links. There's all that to say. There's a lot of upside in the striker pool. Same with the winger position, at least for now, right? If you miss out on Koleosho right now, you've still got championship level wingers in your squad, in the sense that Liam Miller's playing at the same level. Of course, not to compare the two, but just saying for the here and now, I think that gives Marsh a bit of a unique situation where he can find a line without saying like, oh, we need you, and you kind of like play your hands. You could be like, look, like the cards are very simple. I would love to have you guys in our squad. I'd love to you got to play in a World Cup at home, which is, a lot of guys go a whole career of dreaming of playing at a World Cup. You think Erling Haaland is sitting there like, this guy would probably, bite off someone's ear to go to a World Cup for Norway, like let alone, play a home World Cup. It's not an opportunity offered to every top level player. Think about it. And I think that's something where the sales, what's nice for Jesse Marsh is that he has a good sales pitch. And I think there's less of a desperation there. Because I think if this was a Luka Kolyosha, but he plays number 6, we're having a very different discussion where it's like, it's desperation. Like Canada needs to throw everything at him. They need to, they need to do the recruitment. They got to send the whole team over. They got to, do whatever they can, maybe secure a sponsorship for him in Canada, because they need that number 6 step. They don't have that same like rush with the Kolyosha, with the Jebison. And perhaps sometimes that's what you need, where in that process where you just kind of let the player do their thing. And ultimately, as you see, you can only do so much. Like you see the reports this morning that Mo Farsi, again, like it's been the will he, won't he reports from Radio Canada pretty strong, saying like he's set on Algeria. Like fair enough. Like it's something where from the player's perspective, that's the beauty of international soccer. There's a lot of reasons why you'd think he'd go for Canada, but ultimately his heart's with Algeria. You can't control that. And I think what's nice for Jesse Marsh is that with a lot of these players, he's not having to like go over the top. You can kind of just recruit and see where the cards fall.
I have a lot to say to that. I will touch very quickly on the Mo Farsi story, because I put a report a while ago. I was told from a few sources that he doesn't have an interest in representing Canada at all. His mind is made up. It's Algeria. There was some rumors around would he be eligible with the new FIFA rules, or the forever changing FIFA rules? Would he be able to apply for that one-time switch? I was told there was no issues there, and it's just a matter of time before he does. And it looks like today, but I was told months ago that Canada wasn't an option, and his mind and heart is set on Algeria. And it looks like today that he is indeed filing that one-time switch, which is, and that's where I'm going to go into next. Is it's a shame for Canada, because I think he's a great player, and I really would have loved to see that pathway to see where he was to where he is now. But being an international soccer fan, one of your favorite topics is dual nationals. But that's a very complex topic, because you can never put your mind in what a player's going through. And I think Balogun's a great example. Jebson's a great example. It's hard.
Maury, there's just so many extremes of
right?
Either side of this coin.
And some you get right, and some you get wrong. Tomori, for example, does he feel more English than he does Canadian? Is his heart? Is there family reasons? What makes him want to represent one country over the other? If all's the same, well, then where are you going to get opportunity from? I think Tomori's good enough to be the starting center back for England. I don't necessarily think he made the wrong decision. I just think he was dealt.
Well, it's luck too,
bad
right?
Hand, yeah.
Tomori's probably sitting there thinking, I can start for England at the 22 World Cup. I can't even say in hindsight, because I remember tweeting about it, being like, when he didn't even make the squad, I'm like, I don't know if I'm Gareth Southgate. I was probably calling up Tomori, letting alone starting him. Like, ultimately, you can't predict that, your manager might not rate that you play at the Champions League level and prefer some just English blokes who, head the ball very well and are loud. Like, you can't predict that too, right? There's also the luck factor we can't forget, or maybe some guys close to making a move, and there's just he gets injured, or little things like this happen all the time, right?
And that's, you see it all the time too with players who do back themselves. I feel bad for Tomori, because he backed himself to play for England, and he is good enough to play for England, and he got dealt a bad hand. But you see players all the time as well who's you back yourself that maybe you develop, or maybe you work your way in where you're an important player. But you see a lot of the times, say you're eligible for Nigeria and Italy, you go with Italy, you have 10 caps, and that's your Italian career, because you just quite weren't good enough or didn't develop into the player you want. It is a complex issue. Balogun, with the way he was going, and maybe if he progressed even further, maybe he could have been a good option for England. Now, in hindsight, it kind of looks like the US might have been a really good pick for him, because if he had the season he did last year with Monaco, when he was still looking for a call up for England, he probably wasn't going to get it. And this is a good comment here saying the U.S. gave him a pathway to start. You know, he kind of hit the ground running, but kind of faded off. And I think he's going to have a good career with the U.S. And I just think, I don't know, it's a fascinating topic. It's why international football fans love this conversation, but it's also why you have to respect decisions from players. And Farsi is a great example. I don't get, personally, I don't get why he went with Algeria, but it's not my business. And he probably has his reasons. I haven't been able to talk to him in person. It just, being a Canadian soccer fan and seeing the path, that's the path you want to point out. Be like, look what Farsi did. But you can still use an example. Look at where he did. He just ended up with a different national team, I guess. But
it's also another factor too, which is funny. Like, you just can't also predict how a pool will look. Because I think of like Balogun as well. Maybe in like 2 years ago or a year ago when Balogun, kind of wondered, like, England, yes, it's a bit of a long shot, but it wasn't unrealistic. He's probably sitting there in hindsight thinking like, oof, he didn't see that Solanke was gonna have a wild season, that Ivan Toney, of course, he was already in that mix for England, but he was in that mix. Like, there's just all it takes is one season. Like, I just think of all these Nigerian forwards, like they have like 8 world-class strikers. Imagine being a guy who's committed to Nigeria like 2-3 years ago, and now you're sitting there like Osimhen, you got Lookman, you got Boniface. It's just like all these guys, like boom, 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 all in like a 2-year span. You're like, that's also like for Canada, it's something where maybe imagine if you're one of the center backs, like we'll use like say like a Joel Waterman for example, just like as an example. Like he gotten opportunities. He's probably thinking like, oh, Victoria's retiring, I've got this like long-term chance to be an option at the back, and it's like boom, Bombito out of nowhere, Cornelius out of nowhere, both in Liga, and all of a sudden the center back pool just completely looks so different than what it looked 6 months ago. Like, there's also so many ever-changing factors that it's also hard to predict what things are like, where maybe what you need today is not what you need tomorrow.
And also a comment like this, I mean, sometimes you switch too early. Mahrez switched, broke out. I mean, if he wanted to play for France, and knowing that they ended up winning a World Cup, he could have been a part of that team. Maybe he, at the time, he's like, you know what, I don't know if I'm going to hit that level, or maybe he's more attached to Algeria. Who knows? But Alex, we're going to move on to the topic that I'm very excited for, because I put out a tweet yesterday asking for your best and worst Canadian soccer takes. So if you guys have any in the comments, feel free to put them in. I put the tweet out, so I have a bunch of replies to it. So I'll go through some of those. We might play a little game with Alex where I'll read one out and I'll let you, and he can tell me whether it's a good or bad take. But if you guys have any, if you can remember any of the takes that you had around Canadian soccer, whether you thought Bompito was going to be a bust, or you saw years ago that Derek Cornelius was going to be the starting CB and was going to move forward, kind of like Alex and I did. Like, that could have been a bragging good take. But let us know. Throw some takes in right now. Throw in any questions as well. I have a bunch of them over here. I don't know if I want to bring up the tweet because I don't know. I remember there was some naughty replies to it, so I might just keep it off screen. But the tweet I put out was, reply to this or DM me some of your best and worst Canadian soccer takes, and tomorrow Alex and I will react to them. So that is what we are going off of. So I will just start firing them away. If you have any takes or anything that you want to talk in or send in, let us know. Like, did you think Canada was going to have an amazing World Cup and make it out of the group? I did. Poor take from Josh, but I also thought Derek Cornelius was going to be a key center back for this men's national team moving forward. So strong take for Josh. Alex, do you have any for yourself that come to mind?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, you do.
in terms of, in terms of worst Canadian soccer takes, oof. I feel like it's always tough to gauge, some of the youngsters, right? Of like, you just were convinced that something was, someone was going to be the guy, for example. I'd have to go back and look, but I know the one take I was happy with, just because I searched it up and I didn't like, oh, that aged pretty well. It's Moise Bombito.
Yeah,
I had some good takes about him before he was drafted, saying like, this guy just looks like he'll be a future Canadian men's national team player. He kind of ticks a lot of the boxes. So I don't know. It's kind of cool to see that, because I'm sure there's a lot of players I've said potential Canadian men's national team. I'm trying to think of some because we've covered some like obscene players over the years in Europe where I'm like, there's probably some where I'd look back and like.
Justin Smith comes to mind.
Justin Smith is, that's probably like one where we
Yeah.
were all pretty convinced after like the U20s, for example, that like he'd be the next one. And like he's still like, again, they're still super young. Like can't write the guy off, but it's definitely his progress is, you know, it's been that's what I find though. That's what again, maybe it's just like my familiarity with the market. I find that like for Canadian like CPL, MLS guys, it's a lot easier to kind of get a gauge on what their ceiling can be, just because I think the platform for their progress is so much more like linear in the sense that for the most part, if you know who these guys are, they're going to play and like there's an upward trajectory. I find I've struggled to like get European prospects right because it's just so tough where it's like you have guys like see for example another one over the last few years like Bilal Halbouni was showing so much great promise at Werder Bremen and it looked like he was going to make that step up to the second Bundesliga and he just didn't get a shot, then he gets hurt, right? It's kind of out of his control. And like that's one where maybe if Bilal Halbouni was 20 and he was playing in Canada, you would have been able to like, oh, he's going to get minutes for a CPL or MLS team. He's going to take that step. He's going to be progress. And I think that's something that kind of stands out.
No, that's true. Sorry, I'm just reading. Okay, I'm going to start naming off the takes, Alex, and we're going to have some fun with this because there's a ton. We're already getting some here in the chat. So here's a take here. My worst take was thinking that Santi and Balogun were better strikers than David. Big David is the best striker in Concacaf by miles. I like that. Teal Bunbury could have still been in the team if he chose Canada. TFC valuing Shaquille Marshall-Rutty 20 million was a bad take. That was one. But all right, Alex, I'm gonna read some off to you, and I want you to tell me whether you think it's a good take or bad take. So, well, here's one here. Jesse Marsh won't be the manager after the World Cup.
I mean, I think that's fair in the sense that like it's not an outrageous take in the sense that if he has a horrific World Cup, he could get sacked. If he has a great World Cup, he can move, like he could attract interest elsewhere. It's something where like ultimately I feel like no matter what happens, it feels like the ball is going to kind of be in Jesse Marsh's court after, in the sense that of course if he has a great World Cup, even a good World Cup, you kind of want to keep him, but if things go poorly, maybe kind of the opinion changes, or maybe he just prices him out. So I think it's something where for Jesse Marsh, it really feels like you want to maximize the next 2 years because you don't know how long it's going to be. Like he's been such a refreshing voice. He's said a lot of the right things. I feel like if you keep him around long term, he can shake up youth development in this country. He can shake up the way things are done. But you also just wonder with the pedigree that he has that I'm more worried on the side of he's going to perform so well that teams are going to be like, oh, like this, let's give Jesse Marsh a shot again. So yeah, I could see it happening.
So that was half that, and he put that as the worst take, and I'm assuming he meant that, meaning that Jesse Marsh wasn't going to do overly well with Canada and would probably have a poor World Cup and get sacked for it. That's what I think he meant. He put as his best take that Canada will make it out of the group at the 2026 World Cup. There's a lot of drone comments in this, so I'm going to try to skip around a lot of them. Here's one. Alex, so you think this is a good take or a bad take? Jonathan David staying at Lille isn't the end of the world.
Good take.
Good take.
Again, I think what gets lost in the David discussion is it'd be nice to get him a move, but it's not like where he's stuck at like a place where it's ridiculously below his level, because there's still value. Like this is a club that's 1 or 2 wins, a win, an aggregate win away from being in the Champions League. This is a team that will push for the title this year with, just how things have shook up at PSG. They've brought in Bruno Genesio, the former Rennes coach. I'm quite familiar with. He was good for Rennes and helped them push to some pretty big heights. They made some good signings because they sold Lenny Yoro for a lot of money. So they were able to bring in the likes of Thomas Meunier and some other big pieces. It's not like he's staying at a horrific situation. I think it's important to remember. I think for David, where he's at in his career, he could absolutely benefit from a step up to England, to step up to another league. But he's only 24, and what I like in his situation, you're not sitting there and he's not hitched to a long-term contract. He could very well go on a free and make those realities happen. So no, I think it's a good take to say it's not the end of the world. He stays at Lille for those reasons. It's frustrating because we
Yeah.
want to see him move, but it's not the end of the world.
Hey, I mean, going full circle here, there's a report that was put out this morning that Inter Milan are keeping an eye on Jonathan David for a free, because if you followed Inter, they've done incredibly well with strategic signings. Çalhanoğlu is a perfect example. Thuram's a perfect example. They look at value, and especially at value when contracts are coming to the end, knowing that the first, I'd say, big top club that was keeping an eye on Jonathan David was Inter Milan, unless it was Liverpool. Those are kind of both a long time ago when he was kind of breaking through. But Inter Milan was always, I'd say, the most consistent one. Those died away for a while, but now all of a sudden, if he does go into this season knowing that he can become a free agent, Inter Milan are circling around and looking for some value. So
also, you have to say we don't know how he's going to do, but say he scores 15, 20. I think that's a fair baseline. Like free agent strikers who have scored 20 or so goals in a top 5 league for 3+ seasons, where still like 25 was what he'd be. I think is, you have to remember, again, it's something where you'd like to see him move now, but he's going to be in a pretty decent situation next year as long as he scores goals for Lille and they do well in the Champions.
Well, look at Marcus Thuram. I mean, what a season he had coming from a free. I would imagine that the two are going to free agency. They're different profiles, obviously, but I think going as a free agent right now, I think Jonathan David could definitely have some suitors, although we've been saying that for years, but he'll get a move. But all right, next take. 4-2-3-1 is our strongest formation with one of Chouanier or Osorio as the 10 and Larin on the bench. Good take or bad take?
I think after what we saw at the Copa America, that has to be a good take. I think something where Canada, they looked good in the 4-2-2-2, but they just looked off offensively all tournament. And they go to the 4-2-3-1 in that Uruguay game with the B team, and they just looked phenomenal. I think the 4-2-3-1 could really unlock some of the issues Canada had at Copa America. So this tweet, I think, to be fair, caters to the audience. I think they know us. They know what we think of that formation. But that's green. That's green lights all the way. Get Canada the 4-2-3-1. Come on.
Yeah. Shout out to Evan. He knows. He knew the audience that he was targeting there. He also sent out a hot take, so I won't make you guess this one. But I mean, once I read it, you will understand that it's a hot take. Davies falls out of favor at Real Madrid. It impacts his national team performances, and he eventually loses his starting spot at left back under Marsh. So assuming he gets the move to Real Madrid, he doesn't do very well. Maybe he falls behind Mendy. He doesn't impacts his confidence. He doesn't perform for Canada and gets dropped. That is quite the take. I don't see that happen. I just don't. I just feel like there's, no matter what, Davies is going to start for this team. Now you could throw it a hot take being like Canada plays better without Davies in there. You can open up the door maybe to some of that, but I just think it doesn't matter what manager's going to be there. If Alphonso Davies is healthy, he will be in the starting 11, whether it's striker, center mid, left mid, right mid, left back, doesn't matter. But
I can't even really see him falling out of form. That's one thing with Davies is that's always been remarkable to me. It's he rarely loses his spot, and I just say that's remarkable considering this dude's had some pretty major injuries and health concerns over the years, right? Or it's he's had some pretty big setbacks, yet he's always found a way to earn a spot in some form or another. Even last year, where again some more injuries, Bayern finally had a replacement for him in the sense they had Guerrero who could fill his position, Mazraoui. Yet Davies is all right, I'll just go in as a winger. Davies is he's remarkably resilient in that way, where he does well to keep his spots. I think it's hot in the sense just to imagine Davies losing his spot because he's a competitor, and I think in an environment like Real Madrid, he would definitely do what he can to keep his spot.
Hey, I like it. It's entertaining. There's some good takes in here. There's a lot. I won't be able to get through all of them. So if you're watching this and you put in I take
as many as we can.
I appreciate it. So we'll try to kind of rapid fire a little bit. This one's a long one, so I'm going to try to cut it up as I say it out. But it's basically along the lines of our lack of overall depth is a concern. Sure, it's fantastic that a couple of our backline center backs were able to get solid moves to European clubs, but beyond that, we have a regressing Kamal Miller. Who else do we have at CB? Also, our midfield is in a bit of a crisis mode. I think this is more of just a vent than anything. I don't know if you think that's maybe I'll rephrase it. Do you believe in what he's saying? Is that a respectable take, or do you think maybe a little exaggeration there? Because I think our center backs, I think we clearly have our top two right now, and I think we have decent depth now at center back. Midfield, I wouldn't say crisis mode, Although I would like to have more natural sixes in the pool. That's the one area I'm looking at this men's national team. I'm like, man, beyond Eustachio at a six, it's the reason I think we didn't see Piet feature at Copa America. I don't think Jesse Marsh trusted him to go out there. I don't know. I would say six is my biggest issue with this team, but beyond that, yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Alex?
I disagree with the center back take. I think, of course, it's great to have Bombito Cornelius. I think Canada's in a good enough position where Kamal Miller showed at this Copa America. He was ready to step up and do it. He was like very good when called upon. He just wasn't called upon very often. I think Joel Waterman, if needed, can step up and do a job. A lot of these other guys, there's a lot of young, intriguing center backs. Like I'll continue to say, like, just keep an eye out on Noah Batney at York. Like for his age, what he's doing at that level. Like there's a player in there. There's a lot of just like center back options. And yeah, of course, if Canada loses Bombito or Cornelius, it will hurt. Like that's just international soccer, right? Like you don't think some of these teams like France will be like frustrated if they lose X player. Like, yeah, that's just the nature of losing players. I will agree though, the midfield is concerning. And I think what's a bit concerning is that over the last like 2 years, it feels like there's been some new center back prospects that have emerged. There's been some new forward prospects, goalkeeper prospects, fullback prospects. There just haven't been like a whole lot of young midfielders that have emerged, right? Because it's like guys like Ahmed and Chouanier have kind of been there for the last like year or so, knocking on the door. But since then, like, you know, I guess there's Nathan Saliba, but you know, maybe you want to see him take another step with Montreal before he can, you know, regular. Like, I still think Canada should look at him because it's something where genuinely a midfield depth. I agree that's more of a concern, and I'm very curious to see if over the next year if we're going to see some surprise names pop up because Canada needs it.
I mean, like those players you mentioned, I think took a step at Copa America. I think there's some other ones out there, but like when you look at the number sixes, if you could only play an actual number six, who do you have? You have Eustachio, Piet, and Laturi. Would you throw anybody else in there that comes to mind right now that is a natural six?
Yeah, six. A lot of these guys are more eights, and even then, like that's why I say, like in terms of eight depth, right? Say you have a 3-man midfield, and you say you put Eustachio as a six for sake of comparison, right? You put Kone as one of the eights, and you pick Chouanier Ahmed. The other one becomes the backup. Like the 8 depth isn't insane either, in the sense that like all of a sudden after those guys, it's like who's next up? And a lot of the young Canadians that have come through over the last, like a lot of the guys we're looking at as, you know, guys to watch out for, like Kamani Stewart-Baines. That's another winger. That's a forward. Like that's a big thing I want to see is in this next crop of like youngsters that will come up in MLS. Who's a midfielder to watch? That's why someone like Jeevan Badwal at the Whitecaps feels like one, but he's young, and that's a lot. He's something where he's going to need years to develop and hit his stride. You do not want to put that sort of pressure on him. The midfield is the bigger concern.
I agree. Moving on to a couple other ones here. I'll do a couple kind of rapid fire ones to try to get through out. So just say good take or bad take. So Jesse Marsh has already proven himself to be a better manager than John Herdman.
It's hot. It's definitely a hot take. I'd say too early.
Too early. Okay.
I'll go
back. Backed away from the question. No bad take.
I like the spice of it, but I just think Herdman did too much. Longer span. Give Marsh 6 months. Maybe if he wins the Nations League next year, we'll talk.
All right, that's fair. All right. Our next sponsorship should be from Precision Hawk. Is that a good take or a bad take?
Good take. Money's money.
Money's money. Okay, we'll move away from that one. I thought that was funny. Okay. After the departure of Mbappe, JD is now the best player in Liga.
You know what? Good take.
Good take. You like that?
I like that because you know what? Like for a lot of the top Liga guys, they've had the chance to move on and upward. So I think for JD, like Real, like you forget, like this guy's been up in the Golden Boot race for like 3-4 years. He's scored double digits every year he's been in France. He's won a league title. You know, he's scored back-to-back 20-goal seasons. Like this is, you know, that's a pretty big deal. And of course, PSG losing Mbappe, they've kind of, you know, lost some of their key stars. JD's definitely got to think is up there in terms of stars now in this league, which is, you know, wild to think.
He's a heavy favorite for the Golden Boot. heavy, like
Oh,
obviously, but
wasn't it last year? Like he had all the goals and he was still like 6-7 behind Mbappe in second. Like now that Mbappe is gone, he's probably sitting there thinking,
yeah, if he stays, he should be the favorite, and that could be a big goal for him as well. This is an interesting take. So the tweet was, I'm worried about the French signings are more depth signings than anything else, bar maybe Kone. I don't expect Bear or Cornelius or even Bombito for that matter to be locks and starting 11s. I wish we had finished the season. I wish Bombito had finished the season in MLS before making the move. I think Kone and Bear will start. I think Bombito will start too, but Bombito was brought in to be a direct replacement for Todibo. Todibo. Am I saying that right? Todibo? Yeah, that's the one meme where people mess up his name.
Yeah,
Todibo. Regardless, I butchered it, my bad. But he was brought in to be a direct replacement, so I feel like he's got a very good chance to be in the starting 11. I think Theo Bear, he's been scoring in preseason, rocking the number 9. I think Kone has got a good chance to be a starter. I don't know about Cornelius. I'm on the fence. I'd like to tell myself that he's got a chance. I don't know, Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, I guess let's bookmark this and let's see how this ages. Bear's gonna start 20 plus games. He's gonna score 5 plus goals. I think that's a good fit there at Auxerre. You see it in preseason. That one I'm not worried about. We'll go Kone. That's just the no-brainer. I think that's like 2,000 plus minutes. He's going to be a centerpiece for De Zerbi. I just feel it. Even if maybe it takes some time off the top, like that just makes a lot of sense, and I'm excited about that one. Cornelius is the wild card just because Marseille's depth at center back, but like Cornelius played in preseason right away, so like I think, and Marseille did pay like a decent penny for a center back. I think Cornelius gets 1,000, 1,500 or so minutes, and slowly. Maybe it's not like a nailed on like center back, but I think he rotates in enough that he still cracks 1,000, 1,500 minutes. And the Bombito one, I think with the Nice made some savvy bit of business. I think it's telling that they saw Colorado's hardball with Lyon, where it's like Colorado was like, we want 5, and Lyon was like, ugh, and they came in hot and paid 7. I think Bombito might clear 2,000 minutes this year. So we'll see how all that ages. It's very bold for me. Maybe that's my hot take, to throw those sorts of minutes on guys all moving to the league. But I look at each of those moves. I see clear paths for all of them to play, with Cornelius really being the lone question mark. But I think even then he looks like he'll get a good shot.
I agree with that. I feel like the other 3 are going to get really good minutes, and Cornelius could. I don't really know, but he'd be the one player I would maybe wonder about, depending, if he hits the ground running, he puts himself in a great position. But I think it was right. It was Todibo. I think that's what I said.
Todibo.
Yes, Todibo is what I think I got it right. I remember there's a meme around someone saying Tobido and got it wrong. But anyways, couple of good takes here. This one's just straightforward, and it got a lot of likes. Kone is the most talented Canadian of all time. This is a tough one, isn't it?
I'd say that's hot.
That's a controversial but true. A couple people are saying to it. I don't know.
Because Kone is very skilled. He's very talented. But also I think we forget how skilled Alphonso Davies is. Like this kid, like he is skilled. Like he just doesn't really use it a lot because he's a left back. But like he reminds you every once in a while. Like remember that dribble he had against Galatasaray last year where he just like casually picked the ball up, like meg someone and dribbled through 3. Yeah. Like, Davies also has that in him where I think it's I like the Kone praise because I think Kone is so incredibly technical, and I think that's why he's going to thrive in Ligue 1, just because kid can strike a ball, kid can fizz a ball around, he can dribble. Like his dribbling is just incredible. But just I think this kind of forgets how good of a dribbler Davies is. Like it's again little things, but like this, he's had high skill moves in FIFA or EAFC ever since he's. Like little things like that. Like Davies is incredible. I remember watching him at the Whitecaps. Kid was 15 and he was rouletting around guys. Like, Davies is also incredibly skilled. So it's definitely between those two. So shout out Kone.
I will throw in Jonathan David for a few different reasons, but I've talked to a lot of people who have watched him grow up in Ottawa, And some of the stories that they've said what he was like to watch as a kid is incredible. And then obviously to watch him move on. And right now in his just league, not everything else, but just simply in the league between Ghent and Lille, he scored 101 goals in 206 games. And that basically goes back to when he was a kid, when I was like, just some stories kind of like, shortened down a bit, but just like, he was ridiculous. We would play this kid and he would walk through us. He could put the ball on the line, turn it around, go the other way, and then walk back in again. He was cut from a different cloth, and it's the reason he obviously, moved on to Europe. I've heard a lot of praise around Jonathan David, and you would expect that from someone coming from Canada who's scored 101 league goals in 206 appearances. So I do think he'd be up there.
Like a 5'10", a 5'11" striker. Like you don't thrive at that level, like unless you're incredibly technical.
I agree. And then the last one, Alex, I saved it for you. And then we will wrap up the stream, but it's Theo Corbiano deserves a look. What do you think?
Oof, I'd say.
I know you're high on Corbiano. I know you're high on him, but
right now, not at the moment. I think he just needs to get regular playing time. I think there was a window in March where like he had his good grasshopper move. He got off to a good start with Granada, scored. March made a lot of sense. I think now he kind of had a bit of a quieter end of the year. They're in Segunda. Just play, just like in the sense I don't know why that sounded so like exasperated. Just play in the sense that like there's no rush for him. Canada's in a good spot in the winger pool. Just like carve out a role at Granada and see where it takes him, right? So I think for Corbiano, it just focuses on getting them up, and they can get back in the La Liga by next year. He plays a key role. Like there's no reason why they can't have a look. So it's not at the moment.
I agree. That is all the hot takes or cool takes or good takes that we have. Thank you guys for sending in your guys' questions and statements, and it was a lot of fun doing this. Hopefully, you guys.
Josh, let's while we're here, do you have any hot takes for the September window? Like some hot takes you want to see. Not to put you on the spot, but maybe one that.
I'm a little biased because I've chatted with him before, and I think his story is incredible, and I think honestly he's deserving of a look. I know it's a difficult striker pool, and it's the only one that came to my mind, but I did mention it earlier. But I think Promise David should get a look. It's not really a hot take, but it's just the fact we have a lot of striker depth. I get that, but this kid has went on this kid went on a crazy adventure so far, and not every adventure, as we know with Bombito and other Canadians, is straightforward. And seeing him end up in Estonia, scoring a bunch of goals, somehow getting enough attention to get a move over to Belgium, where he hasn't played a ton of minutes so far in the friendlies in the first few games, but he's come off the bench, he scored a few goals, he's got a trophy already. Fast forward from a couple months ago playing to Estonia to lifting a trophy for a team that was competing for the Champions League place. They didn't get it. He'll be playing in Europe, no matter what, hopefully in the Europa League. I think it's a fascinating story, and I think that he'd be an interesting player to get a look at with the national team, and just a beautiful story all around. Not really a hot take because he's kind of got a little hype around him in Canadian circles, but Alex, what about you?
Yeah, it's tough. I put you on the spot. I'm gonna go I'm gonna go for the. I know this one's maybe hot. You say it's hot. Get Santiago Lopez in. Get him some minutes. Get him against Mexico.
Okay.
Get him some minutes against Mexico. You know what? Like it's friendlies. Reward the kid for some good youth performances, and shake up the dual nationals.
I would say that's a hot take because when I mentioned it earlier, he was the other player I mentioned, but I said just bring him, just to camp for the friendly. He doesn't have to play, just kind of like what they did with Koleosho. But yeah, I mean, putting him in, I think is a hot take, especially against Mexico. It's kind of like a
go for it.
I wouldn't be against it at all, and I don't think a lot of Canadian fans would be either because I think he's a special talent, and if we can get him to commit, I think that the sky's the limit for this kid. Very fun to watch, and I would like to see him. So I'm there, my man. But all right, that's all. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's episode. Be sure to drop a like on your way out, drop a sub, and we will see you guys soon. Cheers, friends.